I came home earlier than expected, dragging my suitcase through the door, thinking I'd surprise my family. I had been gone for several days, working, running errands, convincing myself that all of this sacrifice was for us, for our home, for our children. I was tired, my shoulders heavy from the weight of travel, but my heart was light because I thought I was walking into a moment of joy. I imagined their faces lighting up when they saw me, my husband's arms wrapping around me, the kids running, through the hallway shouting, "Mom's home!" That was the picture I had in my mind. That was the hope that carried me as I turned the key and stepped into my own house. But the surprise was waiting for me. Not the kind you hope for, not the kind you hold on to when you're far away and lonely. Behind that bedroom door, I found my husband with our children's nanny. That moment shattered everything I thought I knew about my home, my marriage, and my life. It was as if the air left my body, as if every wall I had built for safety crumbled at once. The house that I thought was my sanctuary became the stage for my greatest humiliation. And the worst part? The betrayal wasn't hidden in some distant place. It was inside the very walls I paid for, under the very roof I built for my family. I stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of laughter stop, replaced by a silence so sharp it cut deeper than any scream. The kind of silence that tells you they know they've been caught. My suitcase slipped from my hand and hit the floor, the echo running through the hallway like an alarm. My husband's voice cracked into the stillness. "It's not what you think." Those words stung more than the truth because they meant he thought I was foolish enough not to see what was right in front of me. In that moment, 1,000 memories collided inside me. The nights I stayed awake with sick children while he slept. The times I rearranged my work, my schedule, my entire identity just to keep our family together. The trust I gave him without hesitation, the loyalty I offered without condition. And all of it felt like it was being ripped from me in that single breath. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was the erasure of everything I had built, everything I had believed in. I realized then that silence would cost me more than the truth. Staying quiet, pretending it hadn't happened, swallowing the pain just to keep appearances, it would destroy me from the inside out. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the moment I understood that the silence I had been trained to hold would only serve everyone else, while the truth, no matter how sharp, was the only thing that could free me. "I wish I could tell you," I shouted, "that I threw something, that I let the rage pour out, but I didn't." I stood tall in that doorway, my voice steady even though my soul was shaking. Because in that moment, I decided this would not be the end of me. It would be the beginning of something else. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, hit like and subscribe right now because this story is for you. And now I ask you, what would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you under your own roof? Would you crumble in silence, or would you find the strength to turn betrayal into the fire that reshapes your life? For years, I told myself I had the life most women would envy. A stable home, a husband who looked dependable on the outside, 2 children who gave me purpose, and roof that kept us safe from storms. I believed that if I worked hard enough, forgave quickly enough, and kept my voice low enough, I could keep everything together. I thought loyalty guaranteed security, and that love, even when unspoken or one-sided, would be enough to hold us up. I was wrong. When I think back, I realize the cracks were always there. They started small, like the nights he came home late and brushed me off with vague excuses about meetings that ran long. I wanted to believe him because believing the alternative meant dismantling the dream I had built. I told myself all marriages had rough patches, that exhaustion explained distance, that stress explained silence. I didn't want to see that what was actually happening was erasure. Little by little, I was disappearing inside my own life. I was the planner, the caretaker, the cleaner, the scheduler. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who packed lunches, who stayed awake with fevered children while he slept, soundly in the next room. I was the one who ironed his shirts before conferences, who made sure the house didn't just function, but looked presentable when neighbors dropped by. And every time I tried to ask for something back, for attention, for time, for intimacy, the answer was always the same. I'm tired, or worse, silence. Silence that said my needs were too loud, too inconvenient, too much. Still, I clung to the illusion. I took pictures of smiling faces on vacations we couldn't afford, arranging us like pieces of a puzzle to convince the world and myself that we fit together perfectly. I sat through dinners where he barely looked at me, forcing myself to laugh at his stories so it wouldn't be obvious how absent he really was. I let him walk ahead of me in public, carrying myself with dignity even when I felt like nothing more than a shadow. I believed this was normal. I believed this was love. And then came the nanny. At first I told myself it was a relief to have her help. She was young, energetic, always ready to jump in when I was exhausted. She baked cookies with the children, took them to the park, and smiled at me with that look of admiration that only youth can give. I thought she respected me. I thought she looked at me like the woman who built the very home she was working in. How blind I was. Looking back, there were signs. The way she lingered when he came home, laughing at jokes that weren't even funny. The way she dressed a little nicer on days he was around and a little less carefully when it was just me. The way he defended her mistakes, burnt dinners, missed pickups, like she was fragile glass that couldn't withstand criticism. I told myself I was imagining it, that jealousy was beneath me, that I had more dignity than suspicion, but what I really had was fear. Fear of admitting that the life I thought I had was already gone. I became a ghost in my own home, watching scenes play out in front of me like a stranger. He kissed me less. He spoke to me less, but when friends or family came over, he put on the act, hand on my back, smile on his face, making everyone believe we were solid. And I played along, because I thought that was what wives did. Protect the illusion, guard the family image, hide the truth. The truth is, I gave my best years to a man who treated me like a placeholder. I gave him loyalty, respect, my youth, my energy, and he gave me half answers and cold nights. And yet I convinced myself it was enough. That if I just kept giving, one day he would notice. One day he would turn around and love me the way I deserved. That day never came. Instead, what came was the betrayal I walked in on. The betrayal that proved the life I thought I had wasn't a life at all. Just a carefully staged performance where I played the supporting role to everyone else's comfort. And that's the cruelest part. I wasn't just betrayed by my husband and the nanny. I was betrayed by the story I told myself for years, that if I loved hard enough, I would be loved back. That if I endured humiliation quietly enough, it would transform into gratitude someday. That if I sacrificed everything, someone would finally see my worth. Now I see that the life I thought I had wasn't stolen in a single moment. It had been slipping away for years, in silence, in dismissive words, in laughter that excluded me, in the way I was slowly erased until all that was left was the role of wife, mother, servant, ghost. Walking into that room didn't destroy me. It revealed what had already been destroyed. And that's why betrayal cuts deeper than anger. Because sometimes it doesn't just show you who they are. It shows you how long you've been living a lie. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever looked back and realized that the life you thought you had was only real because you kept holding it together alone? Tell me in the comments, because your truth may be the very thing that sets you free. It never starts with the explosion. Betrayal rarely comes in one loud moment that shakes the walls. It begins in whispers, in small cuts so sharp you barely notice the bleeding until it stains everything. And for me, those cuts came slowly, disguised as jokes, comments, and glances that seemed harmless but carried poison under the skin. The first time I felt it was at dinner. We were all sitting around the table, my husband, the kids, the nanny. She had helped cook the meal, though I had done most of the work. He raised his glass and said, "This is delicious." "You're a natural," looking at her with admiration I hadn't seen in his eyes for me in years. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I waited for him to add my name, to acknowledge that I had been the one teaching her, guiding her, making sure nothing burned. But he didn't. He just smiled at her, and she blushed like a teenager. And me? I smiled too, because what else was I supposed to do? 'Cause a scene? No, I swallowed it like I swallowed everything. Then there was the way he began, comparing me, gently at first, then with sharper edges. "She has so much energy with the kids," he'd say, as if my exhaustion from decades of carrying this family was a flaw. "She understands them better," he added once, and I felt something inside me crack. Better? Better than the mother who carried them in her body, who stayed up nights rocking them to sleep, who worked 2 jobs when money was tight. Better than me? And still, I said nothing. But the deepest wound came from the laughter. One evening, I was walking down the hall, and I heard them in the living room. My children, my husband, the nanny. I paused before entering, just listening. My daughter said something I couldn't catch, and then I heard my son's voice, sharp and innocent at the same time. "Mom always forgets stuff. She's getting old." They laughed, all of them. My husband, my children, the nanny. They laughed at me as though I wasn't the one who held their lives together. My chest tightened so hard I had to lean against the wall to breathe. That moment felt like a knife, not because my son meant harm. Children repeat what they hear, but because it confirmed the truth. He had been teaching them, through words and silences, that I was less, that I was fading, that I wasn't worthy of respect. Do you know what it feels like to stand in your own hallway, listening to your family laugh at your expense, and realize you're already a ghost in their eyes? That's a humiliation deeper than anything. Because humiliation at the hands of strangers can be shaken off, but when it comes from the people you gave your body, your time, your youth, your everything, that's a wound that no bandage can cover. Even the nanny's words started to sting. She'd tilt her head at me, smiling sweetly, and say things like, "Don't worry, I've got it from here," as if I was some helpless old woman. Once, when I fumbled with my phone, she said, "It's okay. Technology can be tricky for your generation." My generation. The same generation that built the very world she now enjoyed. And my husband chuckled at her remark, like it was some innocent joke. But I saw the way his eyes lingered on her, how he let her words slide without defense. He never defended me anymore. He didn't even see me anymore. The humiliation built in layers until I began to question my own worth. I started checking myself in the mirror, noticing wrinkles, grey hairs, the softness in my arms. I wondered if I had become invisible because of age, because of the years etched into my skin. But then I realized it wasn't time that erased me. It was choice. His choice. Her choice. Their choice to treat me as if I was less than the foundation they stood on. And yet, even in my silence, I knew one thing. Every laugh, every dismissive comment, every time they spoke over me, every time they forgot to say thank you, I stored it. I carried it like a ledger in my heart, writing down every offense, every cut. Because deep down, a part of me knew the day would come when the silence would end. and when it did, they would finally see the woman they tried to erase. But until that day I endured. I smiled when it hurt. I swallowed words that burned in my throat. I let them laugh. I let them compare. I let them erase me piece by piece. Because I thought, maybe if I let them take everything, they'd finally stop wanting more. I didn't realize they wouldn't stop until I was gone completely. So now I'll ask you, have you ever been humiliated by the very people you sacrificed everything for? Have you ever swallowed the pain just to keep the peace, only to realize the peace was never real? Tell me in the comments, because your story matters more than you think. The night it all broke open, I wasn't even supposed to be home. My trip had been cut short, and I thought coming back early would be a sweet surprise. I rolled my suitcase up the steps, still humming from the drive, rehearsing in my head how I would laugh when they jumped at the sight of me. I thought I'd walk into my children's hugs, into the warm comfort of home, into the life I had built with sweat and sacrifice. But instead, I walked straight into the truth that had been mocking me behind closed doors. The house was too quiet, that eerie silence that isn't peace but concealment. My children weren't in the living room, no cartoons on the TV, no half-empty juice boxes on the table. I called out softly, expecting footsteps. None came. I climbed the stairs, suitcase wheels thudding against the wood, my breath strangely heavy. At the end of the hall, the bedroom door was cracked open, light spilling through in a way that made my stomach turn. I pushed it open. And there they were, my husband and the nanny. Not in some ambiguous position where I could fool myself into believing it was innocent. No. They were tangled together, wrapped in the kind of intimacy that doesn't belong to anyone else. My heart didn't stop. It didn't explode. It shattered slowly, piece by piece, like glass hitting stone. I froze. They froze. The room filled with a silence so sharp it rang louder than a scream. He was the first to speak. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered, fumbling for the sheets, as if fabric could erase what my eyes had already burned into memory. And her voice followed, shaking but rehearsed. "We were just talking. You misunderstood." Talking. Under my roof. In my bed. With the nanny who was supposed to help me care for my children, not steal their father's gaze. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't collapse. I just stood there, holding my suitcase, the zipper still halfway undone, as if the journey had paused not at home, but at some cruel stage, set for betrayal. My chest burned, my throat tightened, but my voice came out steady. Steadier than I thought possible. "Don't insult me with excuses. Don't tell me not to make a scene. This is my scene. You just played your part in it." He begged for calm. She begged for forgiveness, and I realized in that single moment that betrayal is never an accident. It is a choice. A choice they had been making long before I caught them in the act. The humiliation of the past weeks, the laughter, the comparisons, the dismissive remarks, it all flooded back, now illuminated by this truth. They hadn't just betrayed my marriage, they had been rehearsing my erasure step by step until the curtain rose on this final act. And I was done being the silent audience. The breaking point wasn't walking in on them. It wasn't the sight of two bodies that didn't belong together. It was realizing that I had been complicit in my own disappearance, that I had allowed their small humiliations to pile up until they had the courage to commit the ultimate one. And yet, even then, I did not fall apart. Because inside the wreckage of that moment, a new voice rose in me. A voice that whispered, "No more." A voice that told me that silence was the enemy, not the truth. A voice that reminded me that dignity isn't stolen, it's surrendered. And I would not surrender mine again. so I packed what little pride I had left into that suitcase and walked out of the room. Their protests, their scrambling, their shallow apologies followed me down the stairs, but I didn't answer. For the first time, I wasn't explaining, excusing, or forgiving. I was done playing the role they had written for me. I closed the door behind me and felt the night air hit my face. It was cold, sharp, real. I breathed it in, like freedom. Because sometimes the breaking point isn't destruction. Sometimes it's the birth of something stronger than what they tried to bury. And now I ask you, if you were in my place, standing in that doorway with the truth staring back at you, would you have walked away in silence, or would you have unleashed every word they deserved to hear? Tell me in the comments, because your answer might just reveal what kind of strength you carry inside. When I stepped out of that house, suitcase still dragging behind me, I thought the cold night air would break me. But instead, it lit something inside me that I had buried for years. Betrayal doesn't just wound, it ignites. And as much as the hurt weighed on me, it also woke me up from the fog I had been living in. For too long I had swallowed silence, convinced myself that peace was more important than truth, that protecting appearances mattered more than protecting my own dignity. But not anymore. That night, outside my own home, I realized that dignity doesn't live in four walls. It lives inside of me. And I had just taken it back. I walked through the streets with that suitcase, each step a drumbeat of something new rising within me. I replayed every little moment I had ignored, the offhand jokes about me being too sensitive, the times I had done the heavy lifting while he dismissed my exhaustion, the countless evenings where I stayed up folding laundry while he laughed at his phone. And then I thought of her, the nanny I welcomed, trusted, even defended when neighbors raised eyebrows about how much time she spent in the house. How blind I had been, not because I was weak, but because I was loyal. And loyalty, when given to the wrong people, becomes the very chain that holds you down. The fire grew hotter the more I thought about it. I remembered the woman I once was, the woman before the compromises, before the constant second-guessing, before I reduced myself to a shadow so that others could shine. That woman wasn't dead. She was waiting, buried under years of neglect and betrayal. That night, she began clawing her way back to the surface. I checked into a small hotel, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I paid with my own card, held my head high, and walked into a room where the air carried no lies. The sheets were clean, untouched by betrayal. The silence was mine, not forced on me, but chosen. For the first time in years, I felt control settle back into my bones. The betrayal had hurt me, yes, but it had also stripped away the illusions I had been living under. And once illusions burn, they leave behind clarity. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen from tears, but they burned with something fierce. I whispered aloud, "You are not invisible. You are not disposable." And as simple as those words were, they felt like a battle cry. Because betrayal has a way of making you feel worthless, but I refused to carry their lie inside me anymore. I began making lists, not of grievances, but of goals. Small things at first. Open my own bank account, call an attorney, find a safe place for the children when the time came. Each line I wrote down was a spark, and soon those sparks became flames. The more I wrote, the more I remembered who I was, outside of being a wife, outside of being a mother, outside of being someone's servant. I was a woman who had survived, sacrificed, and given. And now I would rise, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of it. The fire that betrayal lit in me didn't ask for permission. It roared every time I thought of their faces, their excuses, their cowardice. And instead of letting it consume me, I chose to let it fuel me. Because when someone betrays you, they think they've destroyed you. But what they never expect is that their betrayal can become the very thing that builds your strength. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. I was preparing. I was becoming someone they could never humiliate again. Every tear I shed became mortar in the wall I was building between their cruelty and my future. And every breath I took was proof that I was not broken. I was reforged. That was the fire that fueled me, the betrayal that was supposed to bury me becoming the very reason I rose. And as I stood in that hotel room, writing my lists and whispering my promises to the mirror, I realized they hadn't taken my life away. They had handed me the match to burn down the old one and step into the new. Now I want to ask, you, when life betrayed you, did you let it burn you down, or did you take the flames and build yourself back up? Tell me in the comments, because your story might just be the spark someone else needs to rise again. The day I decided to go back to that house wasn't about reconciliation. It was about reclaiming my ground. I walked up the steps slowly, suitcase no longer dragging behind me, but standing tall by my side. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was resolve. The same walls that once suffocated me would now witness my strength. I had given them the gift of silence for too long, and silence had cost me pieces of myself. Now it was time for words, measured, calm, undeniable words. When I opened the door, he was sitting in the living room, pretending nothing had changed. The nanny wasn't there that morning, but her presence was still everywhere. The cushion she favored, the faint smell of her perfume clinging to the air. My husband looked up, startled, as though he hadn't expected me to return with such composure. He muttered something about explaining, about things not being what they looked like. But betrayal doesn't need explanation. It stands on its own, heavy and undeniable. I sat across from him, not as his wife, not as the woman he thought he had control over, but as someone who had risen from the ashes of the fire he lit. I pulled out the lists I had written, the proof of my rebirth. Bank account details, legal contacts, plans for the children, a schedule that no longer revolved around his convenience. I laid them on the table between us like evidence in a trial. His face fell when he realized what he was looking at. He expected tears, maybe begging, perhaps even forgiveness. But he wasn't prepared for strategy. I told him calmly, "You don't get to decide the narrative anymore. You had your secrets, your lies, your betrayal. But here's the truth. I'm not staying quiet for your comfort. I'm not erasing myself so you can live your double life. From this moment forward, I choose me." He scoffed, tried to laugh it off, called me dramatic. That word, dramatic, was one he had used before, weaponizing it to make me doubt my reality. But not this time. This time, the word slid off me like water. I met his eyes and repeated, "I choose me." It wasn't loud, but it was final. The power in that moment didn't come from him shrinking back. It came from me standing firm. For years, I had been trained to keep the peace, to smooth things over, to avoid making a scene. But the truth is, sometimes the most powerful scene you can make is the one where you refuse to back down. That day, I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't beg. I stated my truth with the kind of calm that shakes the ground more than any storm ever could. Later, when the nanny walked in, her eyes widened at the sight of me. She mumbled something about quitting, about it being a mistake, but her excuses were no longer my burden. I looked at her the way I looked at him, not with hate, but with clarity. Because betrayal is a reflection of them, not of me, and I refused to carry their shame any longer. I gathered my things, not because I was running, but because I was walking out on my own terms. I had made my choice, and it was the kind of choice that redefines everything. That day, I wasn't the betrayed wife. I was the woman who drew the line. And once that line was drawn, there was no going back. As I closed the door behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. The house, the lies, the shadows, they no longer owned me. My steps down that walkway weren't steps of loss, but of liberation. Because the reckoning wasn't about punishing them, it was about freeing me. And so I'll ask you this. If you had the chance to draw a line that could change the rest of your life, would you be brave enough to step over it? Tell me in the comments, because maybe your answer will inspire someone else to take their own moment of reckoning. When I walked away from that house, for the last time, I didn't just shut a door behind me. I closed an entire chapter of my life, one that I had been clinging to even as it slowly suffocated me. I remember stepping onto the street, the air sharp against my skin, the weight of my suitcase in my hand, and for the first time in years, the heaviness wasn't inside of me. It was outside, left behind with the walls that had trapped me. People talk about freedom like it's an open sky, but for me, freedom started with a single step away from a place where I was no longer seen. I checked into a small hotel that night. Nothing glamorous, just a room with clean sheets and silence that belonged to me. I sat on the bed and listened to the quiet. It was strange at first, almost unnerving, but then it started to feel like a friend. I realized I had been surrounded by noise for so long. Arguments, excuses, betrayals, that silence had become something I feared. But in that room, silence meant peace. Silence meant I had control over my own breath, my own choices, my own story. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, but they weren't lifeless. For the first time, I didn't see a broken woman staring back. I saw someone who had survived the fire and was still standing. I brushed my hair, applied a little lipstick, and told myself, this is the beginning, not the end. It was the kind of affirmation that felt foreign on my lips, but it rooted itself in my chest like it had been waiting there all along. I started making small choices that seemed insignificant, but carried the weight of a new life. I changed my passwords, opened my own accounts, set boundaries I should have drawn years ago. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer, not to hurt him, but to protect myself. I booked a therapy session, not because I was weak, but because I was ready to heal. Every action was a brick, and brick by brick I was building a foundation that no betrayal could shake. The nanny left without a word, or maybe she left with plenty of words I refused to listen to. My husband called, texted, even showed up at the hotel lobby once, but I didn't go down to see him. Because some conversations aren't worth having. Some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. I didn't need to hear his apologies or excuses. I didn't need validation from the person who had stripped me of dignity in my own home. The only validation I needed was the one I gave myself when I decided I was enough. My children, still too young to fully understand, became the focus of my energy. I promised myself they would grow up in a home built on truth, not on silence. I sat with them, answered their questions as best I could, and reminded them that their mother was strong, not broken. That lesson, I knew, was more valuable than any fairy tale of a perfect family. They didn't need perfect. They needed real, and real meant standing tall even after being knocked down. Weeks turned into months, and slowly I began to feel whole again. But here's the truth. Healing isn't neat. It doesn't follow a straight line. Some nights I still cried into my pillow, wondering why the man I had trusted with everything chose deceit over loyalty. Other nights, I lay awake with anger burning hot in my chest. But even in those moments, I knew I was still further along than the day I walked into that bedroom. Because pain may linger, but it no longer defined me. One evening, as I walked through the park with my children, I noticed couples holding hands, families laughing, and for a second I felt that familiar ache, but instead of drowning in it, I smiled. because I realized love had not left me, it had simply shifted. Love was in the way my son held my hand tighter. Love was in the way my daughter leaned her head against my shoulder. Love was in my own heartbeat, steady and resilient. I wasn't unloved. I had simply been loving the wrong person for too long. So here I am, telling you my story, not because I want pity, but because I want you to see what's possible. Betrayal didn't end me, it redirected me. Silence didn't bury me, it taught me to speak louder. And weakness, it never defined me. It was only the pause before my strength. And now I'll leave you with this. If betrayal walked into your home and shattered everything you thought you knew, would you rebuild your life stronger? Or would you keep living in the ruins of what used to be? Tell me in the comments, because your answer might be the mirror someone else needs to see their own reflection of strength. I look back now and see that what was meant to break me became the doorway to something greater. I was placed in front of a truth I didn't want to see, but that truth set me free. Sometimes life strips away what we thought was unshakable so that we can learn to stand on ground we build ourselves. It hurts, yes, but it also heals in ways we can't imagine when we are in the middle of the storm. I learned that dignity isn't something another person can give or take. It is born within us, waiting for the moment we finally decide to claim it. For so many years, I confused sacrifice with love, silence with peace, endurance with strength. But love without respect is not love. Silence that erases your voice is not peace. Endurance that keeps you in chains is not strength. True strength is choosing yourself when no one else does. Every time I doubted, I remembered that betrayal doesn't define me. How I rise from it does. Faith carried me when my own legs were trembling. Hope whispered when all I wanted was to give up. And through it all, I realized that sometimes the greatest blessing comes disguised as loss. I didn't just lose a husband that day. I lost illusions, I lost fear, I lost the version of myself that believed I needed to shrink to be loved. And in losing all of that, I gained something priceless. Freedom. I don't know what storm you might be walking through as you listen to my words. Maybe your betrayal looks different. Maybe your pain has a different name, but the lesson is the same. You are stronger than the silence that tried to bury you. You are more than the titles others give you. Wife, mother, caregiver. You are whole in your own right. And sometimes God allows the cracks so His light can shine through them. The days ahead weren't easy, but they were mine. And that alone was worth every tear I shed. I stopped asking why me and started asking what now? And the answer was always the same. Now you live, now you rebuild, now you rise. So if you are listening to me now, I want you to hold on to this truth. Betrayal may shake your foundation, but it can never take away your worth. Stand tall, speak your truth, don't apologize for reclaiming your voice. Because there is someone out there who needs to see that survival is possible, that freedom is possible, that healing is possible. And maybe, just maybe, you are the proof they are waiting for. If my story touched you, let it be more than just words. Let it be a spark. Let it push you to take the step you've been avoiding, to draw the boundary you've been postponing, to finally say, I matter. Because the moment you claim that, everything changes. Now I want to invite you, if this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe so more people can hear voices like mine. Voices of resilience, voices of transformation, voices that refuse to stay silent. And don't go far, because the next story will take you into another journey of heartbreak, courage, and unexpected redemption. You won't want to miss it. Tell me in the comments, if you were in my place, standing at the edge of betrayal and freedom, would you give someone who broke you a second chance? Or would you finally give yourself the life you deserve?